you came here today because you were very moved by my experience with Yeshua. And I thought I would use this as an example of what it's like to move into an authentic experience. And set this up as an example for many other things we're going to talk about regarding an authentic experience. For those of you who, is there anyone who has not read Love Without End? Okay. Okay. Of those who haven't read it, is there anyone who doesn't know something about the story of what happened to me? Okay, then I'll make that part very brief, because I think we're ready to move beyond that. My home burned down on Christmas Eve, 1989, and that was a traumatic experience, to say the least. I lost everything. And after that, my husband at that time and friends began to have dreams that they would tell me about. That I was supposed to paint this great painting of Christ. And that in order to be prepared for that, everything else in my life had to be wiped away. And it's like burning the weeds out of the garden, and it didn't make sense to me. And I didn't, even if it made sense, it didn't make sense to me why everything had to be burned away in order to do that. But that was perhaps the way they felt like rationalizing it or presenting the story to me. But to get to the point is that the inspirations didn't stop coming, and I didn't stop rejecting them. I had absolutely no interest in that project. Not because I have to say that I had loved Jesus since I was a child. Even during my college days when I was more agnostic than anything else, I still loved Jesus. He was my inspiration, my heart, my source of wisdom, my love. But I still didn't have any interest in painting a picture of him. First of all, I knew having a master's degree in art history, I happened to know that most of the paintings of him in history were done for teaching purposes. During the Middle Ages and even well past the Renaissance, most people were illiterate. And so they learned the stories of the Bible through pictures. And the greatest artist who ever lived had either sculpted or painted portrayals of Yeshua. And I thought, I don't think that reel needs to be reinvented. Besides, I had a little touch of ego involved in this. I was a very well-known artist with paintings in the Smithsonian Institution, and I was shown frequently in New York City, and I had this little derogatory thought that every amateur artist who's gotten a new faith paints Jesus. And I thought, I just don't see myself being in that category. Besides, I didn't feel a real strong faith right then. I felt like I'd been a martyr of some kind, and wasn't my orientation. But the inspirations and the pressures didn't go away. The problem is they weren't mine. They were everybody else's thoughts. That's what everybody else thought I should do. And even I began having dreams. And I didn't know where they were coming from, but again, it was everybody else, somebody else wanting me to do something that wasn't real for me. And so I finally decided to go to put my career back together, and went to a big art show in Los Angeles, and I wasn't happy with what was happening there. I just wasn't happy with me. And on the way home, my husband brought up this subject again, and he said, well, have you thought about that portrait of Jesus lately? And I said, no, I haven't. I don't think about it. If you leave me alone, I never think about it. And he said, well, maybe you need to think about it. So I finally at least consented to give it my attention. See where we're going here? I had not given it any attention before that. I was just completely pushing it out of my mind because it didn't appeal to me. And partly for my own silly reasons. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. But I gave it my attention. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. When we go back, I will give it 2 months of my attention. And if at the end of that time, it doesn't feel right to me. Will you please just never bring it up again? And he said, deal. So I gave it my attention. And during the time that I was giving it my attention, I almost got the feeling that I might actually do this. I didn't know how because I didn't have the genuine inspiration yet. But I started getting ready. I reread the New Testament. I read the Old Testament. I was looking for any kind of tips about what he might have looked like. And no, I did not watch Dances with Wolves. And I did not use Kevin Costner for a model. But I did read the scriptures, and there were no adequate descriptions of him in there. So I was a little frustrated, and I really didn't know how I was going to put this whole thing together. I didn't want to do another Sunday school painting. It was just not who I am. And I was talking to my husband one night, and he said, how's it going? And I said, well, I tell you what, if he shows up, I'll paint him. Deal? November 23rd, 1991. I wear myself out. Not with my work, but with my rejection. Have you ever worn yourself out with resisting something?
Yeah.
Most of the time, that's how we do wear ourselves out. And I had so much resistance, I just went into the state of sleep. I put my head down on the table, and I don't know, I couldn't have been out very long because it's not very comfortable to sit in a chair with your head on the table, but I refreshed myself, and I noticed the light came on. I was on an inside room with no windows, and the overhead light had been turned off, and I looked up and the overhead light was off, but the room was full of light, and I looked down at the table, and there were no shadows. It was like I was inside a cloud. Kind of like when an airplane passes through a cloud, a brightly illuminated cloud, and it's white everywhere. And I looked and it was so quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. I could hear my heartbeat. And I looked into the arched doorway, and he wasn't there in an embodied sense, but there was light. A brilliant spark of light that just flowed in every direction. And in a language I didn't know. I didn't know what the language was. Probably Aramaic or maybe some other language. I really don't know. But I knew what he said. It was like I had a universal decoder somehow inside me because I knew what he said. And he just said, greetings, Glenda. Behold. And when I looked at the light, and the light looked at me, one of the rays of light went it just went right into my optical nerve, and it began to etch the picture that I painted. And the picture became larger and larger, and over the next few days it became more and more real, actually quite holographic. And sometimes when I would close my eyes and look at the picture, I didn't know whether it was just surrounding me or I was stepping into it. Something had happened that opened up a larger piece of the universe to me. And I had been awakened to perceptions I didn't know that I had before that. From that moment on, I had absolutely no resistance with painting this reading. What changed? Did I have an epiphany? No. I had an authentic experience. It wasn't somebody else telling me what I should do. It wasn't somebody telling me that this is a good way to go to the experience. When we have an authentic experience, we're empowered. Life really makes sense. We're there. We've experienced something. We've felt it. We've seen it. We've touched it. It's filled our life. It's filled our heart. It's what we are now. It's who we are now.